In the heart of the corporate world, the glitzy city lights of New York reflect the ambitions of those who dare to dream big, especially in a realm where success often means breaking barriers. For Black CEOs, the journey is often one of grit and resilience, but also fraught with obstacles that reflect deep-seated racial biases. Marcus King, a rising Black CEO of a tech startup, had just closed a groundbreaking deal with a major investor. The celebration should have been the pinnacle of his success. But what happened next would change everything. He stood in the lobby of a luxury car dealership, about to claim ownership of a limited edition Lamborghini, a symbol of his hard-won victory. The salesman, who had been courteous and welcoming just moments ago, now stood in front of him, hesitant. "I'm sorry, sir, but it seems there's been a mistake. The car is no longer available to you." Marcus blinked, taken aback. "What do you mean? I've already secured the funds. The deal is done." But the salesman didn't move, his expression now cold, almost guarded. The words hung in the air, heavy with something unspoken. Marcus could feel the eyes of the other customers on him, the sudden shift in the atmosphere unmistakable. It was then that the chaos began. The call to his lawyer was made, and what followed was a whirlwind of accusations, racial profiling, and a confrontation that would expose the ugly side of a society that wasn't quite ready for Black success. Was this just a clerical error, or something far more insidious? "Call the manager," Marcus demanded. "Now." The salesman hesitated before walking away, and in that moment, Marcus knew something wasn't right. He couldn't help but feel that this was bigger than just a car. It was a battle over his identity, his worth, and his place in a world that was quick to undermine his achievements simply because of the color of his skin. His story was about to spark a firestorm in both the business world and the streets of America. It would bring people to their feet, questioning the systems they thought they understood. But Marcus wasn't about to back down. This moment, this car, was just the beginning. Stay tuned. You won't believe what happens next. In the heart of the corporate world, the bright lights of New York shine on those who dare to dream big, especially for Black CEOs, who often face not only the grind of building success but also the weight of societal barriers rooted in racial prejudice. Marcus King, a rising star and Black CEO of a tech startup, had just sealed a major deal with an investor. It should have been the perfect moment of triumph. But the next scene would rewrite the narrative of his success. He stood in the glossy showroom of a luxury car dealership, ready to claim ownership of a limited edition Lamborghini, an emblem of his hard-earned victory. The salesman, who had been all smiles moments ago, now appeared tense. "I'm sorry, sir, but there's been an issue. The car is no longer available for you," he said. Marcus blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" "I secured the funds. The paperwork is done." The salesman didn't budge, his tone now colder. The words seemed to hang in the air, thick with something unspoken. Marcus could feel the weight of other customers' eyes on him as the atmosphere shifted instantly. That's when the storm began. Marcus called his lawyer, but what followed was not just a legal dispute, it was a racial confrontation that would soon escalate. Was this a simple mistake, or something darker at play? "Call your manager," Marcus demanded, his voice steady, yet firm. The salesman hesitated before disappearing into the back room. And then Marcus knew something wasn't right. The quiet murmur of the crowd and the tension that followed were enough to tell him this was about more than just a car. This was a battle over his identity, his worth, and his place in a system quick to dismiss him simply because of the color of his skin. The moment would soon explode into a full-blown controversy, shaking both the corporate world and the streets of America. Marcus wasn't going to back down. This wasn't just about a car. This was about proving he belonged, and he wouldn't let anyone take that from him. Stay tuned. You won't believe how this unfolds. As Marcus stood in the showroom, the tension in the air thickened. He could feel the weight of the moment press down on him, the eyes of every customer in the room now shifting between him and the salesman, whose face was an unreadable mask. His mind raced, trying to process what had just happened. How could this be? He'd done everything by the book, signed every piece of paper, transferred the funds, and had been assured multiple times that the car was his. The Lamborghini was more than just a symbol of success, it was a personal milestone, a physical manifestation of all the struggles he had overcome to reach this point. But now, it was slipping through his fingers. "I don't understand," Marcus said, his voice calm but firm. "I've paid in full. There's no mistake." The salesman shifted uncomfortably. "It's not about the payment, sir," he stammered, "it's about protocol. The car has been pulled from your account." Marcus could feel a fire ignite within him. He wasn't just dealing with an error or a mix-up. This felt intentional. The more the salesman hesitated, the more it became clear that something was off. "Get your manager," Marcus said, his tone sharp now. "This isn't happening." The salesman walked away reluctantly, his footsteps echoing in the quiet showroom. Marcus stood there, his jaw clenched, his mind racing with questions. The longer he waited, the more it seemed like a simple transaction had suddenly become a battle for respect, a battle he wasn't going to lose. As he reached for his phone to dial his lawyer, the atmosphere in the room shifted again. Other customers, who had previously been oblivious to the unfolding drama, began to murmur among themselves. He could feel their eyes on him, their curiosity palpable. Was it pity? Was it skepticism? Was it judgment? It didn't matter. Marcus wasn't here to be anyone's token black success story. He wasn't here to be patronized, and he wasn't here to play by rules that weren't designed for people like him. When the manager finally walked in, Marcus stood tall, his back straight, his gaze unwavering. "I'm Marcus King," he said, his voice measured but firm. "I've just been told that the car I've already paid for is no longer available to me. I'm assuming this is some kind of mistake, but I need an explanation. Now." The manager, a middle-aged white man with a polished appearance, blinked in surprise. He glanced at the salesman, then back at Marcus. There was a moment of hesitation, before the manager's face shifted into a more neutral expression. "I'm sorry for the confusion, Mr. King. But as my colleague mentioned, there seems to be a problem with your account." Marcus didn't flinch. "What exactly is the problem?" he asked, his voice cold. The manager hesitated again, clearly uncomfortable with the conversation. "It's a procedural issue," he said slowly, his tone becoming more defensive. "Nothing personal." Marcus's heart pounded in his chest. He had heard that line before. He knew exactly what it meant. It was the same line, the same excuse, that had been used in countless situations where a black person was made to feel like they didn't belong, like they didn't deserve to be where they were. "So, you're telling me that I can't buy a car I've already paid for because of some procedural issue?" Marcus said, his voice rising with frustration. "What kind of procedure is that?" The manager shifted uncomfortably. "It's not about the money, Mr. King. It's about the process." The words hung in the air, and Marcus knew this was bigger than just a car. It was about a system that refused to acknowledge his success, his hard work, and his place in the world. And Marcus wasn't about to let them get away with it. He'd fought too long and too hard for everything he had. This moment wasn't just about a car. It was about respect. It was about proving that he, Marcus King, belonged. "I want this resolved now," he said, his voice icy with resolve. "If you think this is just some mistake, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. But if this is anything else, I will take this all the way. Do you understand?" The manager nodded stiffly, and Marcus could see the unease in his eyes. "Yes, Mr. King. We'll work to sort this out," the manager said. But Marcus wasn't convinced. He knew better than to trust the words of a man who had already shown his true colors. This was only the beginning. He wasn't going to walk away until he got what he came for. As the manager walked away to resolve the issue, Marcus stood there, stewing in silence, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. The showroom, once filled with the soft hum of ambient music and polite chatter, now felt like a battlefield. The murmur of the other customers had grown louder, a mixture of curious whispers and, Marcus could swear, some barely concealed judgment. He could feel their eyes on him, sizing him up, wondering how long he would stay calm, how long he would tolerate this blatant disrespect. But this was nothing new. For Marcus, this was just another day in a world that constantly tried to remind him that no matter how successful he became, he would always be seen as other. He had built his business from the ground up, fought tooth and nail for every contract, every partnership, every deal. But it was moments like this that made him question if it would ever be enough. The manager returned, but now he seemed different. The forced politeness was gone, replaced by an almost cold professionalism. He didn't even look Marcus in the eye as he spoke. "We've double-checked everything, and unfortunately, the car is no longer available," the manager said, his voice tight. Marcus could feel his patience beginning to fray. He had been through this routine before: the runaround, the evasive answers, the dismissal of his time, his money, his worth. "So, that's it?" Marcus said, his voice steady but growing with anger. "After all that, you're just going to tell me the car isn't available?" The manager shifted uncomfortably. "I understand your frustration, Mr. King, but this is the situation." "No, this isn't a situation," Marcus shot back, his voice rising. "This is discrimination. You've denied me the car based on something I don't even know. If you're going to pull the race card, then just say it." The manager stiffened, his expression unreadable. He took a deep breath, as if considering his next words carefully. "I assure you, this is not about race. It's simply a matter of protocol." "Protocol?" Marcus laughed, but it was a harsh, bitter sound. "You think I don't know what that really means? I've seen it 1,000 times. I'm sorry, but you don't meet the criteria." "I don't meet the criteria?" Marcus's voice was now full of disbelief. "What criteria? Is it because I'm black? Is that it?" The words hung in the air, heavy and charged. The manager didn't answer right away, his gaze flickering uncomfortably toward the salesman who had initially spoken with him. "Mr. King, you're making assumptions," the manager finally said, his voice still calm but tinged with a hint of defensiveness. "I'm not assuming anything," Marcus replied. "I'm calling it like it is. You're denying me a car I've already paid for, and you expect me to just accept it." He paused for a moment, the gravity of the situation sinking in. He was no longer just fighting for the car. He was fighting for something bigger: his dignity, his right to be treated equally in a world that too often failed to do so. "I'm going to make this right," Marcus said, his voice cold with resolve. "And if I have to take this to court, if I have to expose every dirty little detail about how you're treating me, I will." The manager hesitated, his expression faltering for a second, before he quickly composed himself. "We'll look into this further, Mr. King. Please give us some time." Marcus took a deep breath, forcing himself to stay calm. He knew this wasn't over. He knew it was going to get worse before it got better, but he was ready. Ready to fight not just for the car, but for the respect that he, and so many others like him, had been denied for far too long. As he walked out of the dealership, he didn't look back. This was far from finished. In fact, it was just beginning. Marcus walked out of the dealership, the heavy weight of the situation still pressing down on his chest. The cool New York air did little to calm the fire that had ignited inside him. As he slid into the driver's seat of his own car, he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about the Lamborghini anymore. It wasn't even about the money. It was about the way he was being treated, like his success didn't count simply because of his skin color. His mind raced as he pulled out of the parking lot, his phone buzzing in his pocket. It was his lawyer. He answered it with a snap. "Marcus, what happened? You okay?" his lawyer's voice came through the phone. "I'm fine," Marcus said, trying to keep his voice steady. "But something's not right. They're pulling every excuse they can to deny me that car. I need your help." His lawyer was quiet for a moment, the silence stretching out between them. "Okay, let me get this straight," the lawyer said, his voice calm but concerned. "You've already paid for the car, and now they're telling you it's not available? But they won't give you a clear reason?" "Exactly," Marcus said, his voice rising. "They keep saying it's protocol or some procedural issue, but I know damn well what this is. They're discriminating against me." His lawyer sighed. "Marcus, you've worked hard to get where you are, and I know it's frustrating, but don't let your emotions take over. We need to handle this the right way. Marcus gripped the steering wheel tightly, the anger bubbling up inside him again. The right way, he repeated, his voice incredulous. I've done everything the right way. I've followed every rule. I paid for that car in full, and now they're treating me like I don't belong there. Look, his lawyer said, trying to keep him calm. I'm going to make some calls, start an investigation, and see if we can get this cleared up. But you need to be patient. Patient? Marcus barked, his voice harsh. I've been patient my whole life. I've been patient through every door that was slammed in my face, through every opportunity that was denied to me just because of the color of my skin. How much longer do I have to be patient? There was a pause on the other end of the line. I know this is hard, his lawyer said quietly. But this is bigger than just a car. We can't fight every battle at once. Let me take care of this legally. Marcus's chest tightened. He knew his lawyer was right in some ways, but he couldn't let this go. It wasn't just about the car, it was about making a statement. About showing that even when the system tried to break him down, he wouldn't give in. Fine, Marcus finally said, his voice low. Do what you have to do. But I want to make sure we take this all the way. We will, the lawyer assured him. I'll get back to you soon. As Marcus hung up the phone, he looked out at the city skyline, the lights of the buildings reflecting his determination. He knew that the road ahead wasn't going to be easy. There would be battles to fight, obstacles to overcome, and people to prove wrong. But he wasn't going to let anyone undermine his success, not now, not ever. This wasn't just about a car, it was about his place in the world, his right to be seen, to be respected, to claim what was rightfully his. And he wasn't going to back down until he had what he deserved. The next few days were a blur of calls, meetings, and legal battles. Marcus spent hours on the phone with his lawyer, trying to figure out how to push back against the dealership's refusal to deliver the car. Every time he thought he had a breakthrough, the dealership would come up with another excuse, another roadblock. It was clear to him now, this was no mistake, no misunderstanding. They didn't want him to have the car, and they were willing to go to any lengths to make sure he didn't. But Marcus wasn't backing down. The more they pushed him, the more determined he became. He knew he had the law on his side, but he also knew that there was something deeper at play here. This wasn't just about a car, it was about the systems of power and privilege that had been working against him since the day he was born. Every time he walked into a room, he had to fight to prove that he belonged. Every time he succeeded, there was always someone ready to tear him down, to undermine his achievements. This was just the latest chapter in a long history of battles. But this time, it was different. This time, Marcus wasn't going to let it slide. He couldn't. As he sat at his desk, surrounded by papers and legal documents, his phone buzzed again. It was his lawyer. He answered quickly. Marcus, I've got some news. The tone in his lawyer's voice was serious. What's going on? Marcus asked, already knowing that whatever he was about to hear wouldn't be good. The dealership is digging in their heels, the lawyer said. They're refusing to settle. They're claiming that you breached some kind of protocol during the transaction, but I don't believe that for a second. What are they saying now? Marcus asked, frustration creeping into his voice. They're claiming that there was an issue with the financing, saying that the transaction was flagged by their system. But we know that's not true. The payment was processed and approved. There's no reason they should be withholding the car. This is unbelievable, Marcus muttered. They're just making excuses. Exactly, the lawyer replied. And the worst part is, they're trying to make this your fault. They're trying to say you're the one who's causing the delay. Marcus slammed his fist down on the desk. I'm not going to let them get away with this, he said through gritted teeth. We need to take this to the next level. I'm not just going to sit here and let them walk all over me. His lawyer paused, considering the next steps carefully. Okay, but we need to be strategic here. The last thing we want is for this to turn into a media circus, but if they don't cooperate, we may not have a choice.
Marcus took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing thoughts. I know.
But they need to understand that they can't just do this to me, or to anyone else who looks like me.
We have to make them see that this is about more than just a car.
He paused for a moment, his mind running through the possible outcomes.
We'll take it to court if we have to. But I'm not walking away from this.
I know, his lawyer said.
I'll keep pushing on my end. You just keep doing what you do best. And what's that? Marcus asked. Keep winning, the lawyer replied.
Marcus smiled to himself. It was what he did best. No matter how many times life knocked him down, he always got back up.
This wasn't just about a car.
This was about proving that he belonged, that he was deserving of respect, and that no one could take away what he had worked so hard to achieve. He wasn't going to stop until he had that Lamborghini in his driveway, but more importantly, he wasn't going to stop until he had the respect he had earned. Marcus sat in his office, staring at the stacks of paperwork in front of him. He had never been one to back down from a challenge, but this situation was different.
It was personal.
The dealership's refusal to hand over the car wasn't just a minor inconvenience, it was an attack on his identity, on everything he had worked for.
As a black CEO, he had fought his entire life to be seen, to be respected. Now, it seemed, even his success wasn't enough. He could feel the weight of the world pressing on his shoulders, the pressure building with every passing hour. It was more than just a luxury car, it was a symbol of the battles he had fought and the victories he had earned. And yet here he was, being treated as if he didn't deserve it, as if his hard work and perseverance meant nothing.
His phone buzzed again, breaking him out of his thoughts.
It was his lawyer. He picked it up quickly.
Marcus, I've got an update for you, the lawyer said, his tone serious.
What's going on?
Marcus asked, his mind already preparing for bad news.
I've made some headway, the lawyer continued. I've spoken to a few people inside the dealership.
It turns out this isn't the first time they've pulled something like this. They've got a history of trying to deny black customers high-end purchases.
It's a pattern.
Marcus felt a fire ignite inside him.
So this is deliberate, he said, his voice low and dangerous. They've been doing this to other people.
It looks that way, the lawyer confirmed. I'm looking into it further, but it's clear now that this isn't just a mistake or a procedural error.
What are our options?
Marcus asked, his mind already racing with ideas. We can push for a public investigation, the lawyer said.
We can expose them for what they're doing. But it's going to be a tough fight. Marcus didn't hesitate. I'm ready. Let's take this to the media. Let's make it impossible for them to hide.
I knew you'd say that, the lawyer replied with a chuckle. I'll start reaching out to journalists, but we need to make sure we've got all the facts straight first.
This has to be airtight.
I don't care if we need to burn the whole system down, Marcus said, his voice filled with determination.
I'm not letting them get away with this.
After hanging up, Marcus stood up from his desk, pacing back and forth.
The weight of the decision hit him. This was no longer just about the car. This was about standing up against a system that had been oppressing people like him for centuries.
He wasn't just fighting for himself, he was fighting for every person who had been told they didn't belong, every person who had been shut out of opportunities simply because of their race. The more he thought about it, the clearer it became, he had to fight. He had to expose the dealership for what it was, no matter the cost. As he looked out of his office window at the sprawling city below, Marcus knew the battle ahead would be tough. But he was ready. He had never shied away from a fight, and this was one he couldn't afford to lose. He picked up his phone again, ready to call the lawyer back with instructions.
It was time to take the fight public. It was time for the world to see the truth. No more silence. No more pretending this wasn't happening.
Marcus King was about to make sure his voice, and the voices of countless others, were heard. The media frenzy began within hours. It started with a small article in the local news, but soon, it snowballed into something much bigger. Journalists from all over the country were reaching out to Marcus, eager to get a statement, to get the story out there. His lawyer had advised caution at first, let's keep this quiet for now, build our case, but Marcus wasn't having it. He was done playing by their rules. The dealership had crossed a line, and now the whole world needed to know about it. That afternoon, Marcus stood at a press conference, facing a sea of cameras, reporters, and flashing lights. His lawyer was beside him, but it was clear that Marcus was the one in charge now. The weight of the moment didn't escape him. This wasn't just about a car. This was about a system that had long treated people like him as second-class citizens. As he stepped up to the podium, the room went quiet. Marcus took a deep breath, then looked directly into the cameras. Good afternoon, he began, his voice calm but filled with authority. My name is Marcus King, and I am here today to talk about a situation that goes far beyond a simple transaction. I am here to talk about discrimination. He paused for a moment, letting the words sink in. He could see the reporters leaning forward, pens poised, eager for what he would say next. Last week, I attempted to purchase a car from a luxury dealership here in New York City, a car that I had already paid for, in full, with no issues. But after a series of confusing and inconsistent explanations from the staff, I was told that the car was no longer available to me. Why? Because I am black. The room was dead silent now. You could feel the weight of the moment, the disbelief on everyone's faces. Marcus could see it in their eyes, the realization that this was bigger than just a car deal, that this was about something deeply ingrained in the fabric of society. This is not an isolated incident, he continued, his voice steady and clear. I am not the first, and I will not be the last. But this stops here. We will not stand by and let these acts of racial discrimination continue. He looked directly into the eyes of the cameras now, his gaze unwavering. I am calling on the dealership to make this right. I am calling on all of us to stand together and demand better. I will not be silenced. We will not be silenced. It is time for a change. With that, he stepped away from the podium, his heart pounding in his chest. The reporters swarmed him immediately, shouting questions, pushing for details. But Marcus didn't answer them. He had already said what needed to be said. The message had been delivered. And now, the ball was in their court. As he walked away from the crowd, he felt a weight lift off his shoulders. The world knew what had happened. The fight was no longer just his. It was everyone's. For the first time in his life, Marcus felt a sense of power that he had never felt before. The system was trying to break him, but he wasn't going to let it. He had a voice, and now the world was going to hear it. The aftermath of the press conference was nothing short of chaotic. Within hours, Marcus's story had gone viral, sparking outrage across the country. Social media exploded with comments of support and condemnation, with people from all walks of life sharing their own experiences of racial discrimination in the luxury market. The dealership's response was swift, but not in the way Marcus had hoped. They issued a statement claiming that they were investigating the situation and that Marcus's claim was based on a misunderstanding. They denied any racial bias, stating that the issue was solely about a technicality in their sales process. But the damage had been done. The public wasn't buying it. Marcus's phone rang non-stop. The media kept calling, wanting exclusive interviews. Some of them tried to twist his words, painting him as an angry, entitled individual, but Marcus didn't care. He wasn't here to be liked. He was here to make a statement. He was here to demand change. At first, the dealership remained firm in its stance, but the pressure kept mounting. As the days passed, more and more people came forward with similar stories, black customers who had been denied access to luxury goods, or whose transactions had been scrutinized and delayed for reasons that had nothing to do with financial capability. Marcus knew they couldn't ignore this forever. He had become the face of something much bigger than himself. This wasn't just about a car anymore, it was about a larger fight for equality, for justice, for recognition. Marcus had fought his whole life to prove he belonged, to show the world that he was more than just his skin color. And now, that fight was taking on a life of its own. As the media storm raged on, the dealership eventually relented. They reached out to Marcus, requesting a meeting.
Marcus knew this was their attempt to save face, but he wasn't interested in playing their game. He agreed to the meeting, but on his terms. If they wanted to make things right, they were going to have to do more than just apologize. He wasn't about to let them sweep this under the rug. As he walked into the meeting, he felt a mixture of anticipation and resolve. This was the moment of truth. He was no longer just the CEO of a tech startup, he was now the voice of countless others who had been silenced for too long. The room was filled with executives, their faces tight with unease. The manager from the dealership, the same one who had refused him the car, was seated at the head of the table. He looked up as Marcus entered, his expression guarded. Marcus didn't waste any time. "I'm here today because you owe me, and everyone like me, a lot more than an apology," he said, his voice steady and firm. "You've denied me something I rightfully earned. But this is bigger than just me. It's about accountability. It's about making sure this doesn't happen again. And I'm not leaving until you commit to that." The silence in the room was palpable. Marcus stood tall, his presence commanding respect. He had come into this room not just to fight for himself, but for a future where people like him didn't have to prove their worth every single day. This was no longer just a personal battle, it was a movement. The dealership executives exchanged uneasy glances, but Marcus wasn't backing down. He wasn't going to let them dictate the terms of his success. This fight was far from over. The meeting room was tense, the silence stretching between Marcus and the dealership executives like a thick, suffocating fog. The manager who had initially refused Marcus the Lamborghini sat at the head of the table, his eyes flickering nervously toward the other executives in the room. Marcus could see the discomfort on their faces, they weren't used to being confronted, especially not by someone like him. But that's exactly why Marcus was here. He wasn't going to let them get away with what they had done, and he wasn't going to let them treat him as if he didn't belong. "I'm not here to listen to excuses," Marcus said, his voice sharp, breaking the silence. "I'm here to make sure this never happens again, to me or anyone else." The room shifted slightly as the executives began to stir, murmurs spreading across the table. The manager's face flushed red. "Mr. King," he began, "we understand your frustration, but the situation is much more complex than it appears." Marcus interrupted him. "Don't try to spin this. I've seen it before, people like me constantly being told we don't belong, constantly having to fight for what we've already earned. Your company has a problem, and it's bigger than me. It's about how you treat black customers, how you dismiss them when they walk through your door. That's the issue." The room fell silent again. Marcus's words hung in the air like a weight. No one spoke for a long moment, but Marcus could see the wheels turning behind their eyes. They knew he was right. The manager finally cleared his throat, trying to regain control of the situation. "We don't condone discrimination in any form," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. "However, our process, your process?" Marcus repeated, leaning forward. "Your process is what's broken. It's not about protocol, it's about who you're willing to sell to. And I'm not the only one who's been treated like this." The manager shifted uncomfortably in his seat, but Marcus wasn't done. "I've talked to people, customers who have experienced the same thing. And I'm not going to let you sweep this under the rug. Not this time." He paused for a moment, letting the words sink in. "This needs to change. Today." Marcus's gaze locked with the manager's, unyielding and intense. The silence was deafening, but Marcus stood his ground. "I'm here to make sure that my experience isn't just some isolated incident," he continued. "You need to publicly acknowledge what's happened. You need to apologize, not just to me, but to every black person who has ever walked into your showroom and been made to feel less than." The executives exchanged glances, their discomfort growing more palpable. The manager looked at the table, clearly struggling. "We can issue a public apology, but..." He hesitated. "But what?" Marcus pressed. "But I need more than just words. I need real action. I need you to implement new policies that ensure this never happens again. I need you to train your staff on racial sensitivity, and I need you to be held accountable. No more lip service." The manager was silent, and Marcus could see him weighing the decision. This was no longer about a car, it was about doing what was right. "I'm not walking out of here without a commitment," Marcus said, his voice steady but firm. "I want a plan. And I want it in writing." The manager finally nodded, his shoulders slumping. "We'll work on that. We'll make the necessary changes," he said, clearly defeated. Marcus didn't smile, but inside, he knew he had one. This wasn't just about getting the Lamborghini anymore, it was about setting a precedent. This fight was far from over, but today, Marcus had made a powerful statement. He wasn't going to let them or anyone else erase his achievements or his dignity. He had fought, and he had won. And for the first time in a long time, Marcus felt like he had truly been seen. Marcus walked out of the dealership meeting with a sense of satisfaction, though the battle was far from over. The executives had promised change, but Marcus knew better than to take their words at face value. It was easy to make promises behind closed doors, but real change would require action, and he wasn't about to let them off the hook so easily. The next day, he called a press conference. This time, it wasn't just about the car. It was about accountability. "I want to make one thing clear," Marcus began, standing before a sea of reporters. "What happened to me was not an isolated incident. It's part of a much larger issue that affects too many people in this country, especially in the luxury market. Too often, black people are made to feel like we don't belong, like we don't deserve success. But that ends today." The room was silent, the weight of his words hitting everyone present. Marcus paused, making sure he had their full attention. "I am not here to tear down the dealership," he continued. "But I am here to hold them accountable. I'm here to make sure that what happened to me doesn't happen to anyone else. This is about a systemic problem that has gone unaddressed for far too long." The reporters scribbled furiously in their notebooks, the cameras flashing in rapid succession. Marcus could feel the gravity of the moment, the understanding that this story was about to change the conversation. He wasn't just a businessman now, he was a voice for those who had been silenced. "I am demanding that the dealership take real steps to address this issue. They need to put into place mandatory training for all staff on racial sensitivity and bias. They need to publicly acknowledge what happened and issue a formal apology not just to me, but to everyone who has been discriminated against in their showroom." The reporters were eager for more, pressing him with questions, but Marcus wasn't finished. "But it doesn't stop there. We need to see real, tangible results. No more empty promises. This fight is bigger than one dealership, bigger than one car. This is about justice. This is about making sure that everyone, regardless of their skin color, is treated with dignity and respect." Marcus looked directly into the cameras, his voice unwavering. "I will not back down. I will continue to fight for what is right, and I will not stop until I see change." As the conference wrapped up, Marcus felt a sense of empowerment. He had spoken his truth, and now it was out there for the world to see. The battle was far from over, but he had set the stage for a movement. It wasn't just about a car anymore. It was about standing up to the system that had tried to silence him and so many others. It was about making sure that his story, and the stories of countless others, were heard. And as the reporters dispersed, Marcus felt a quiet confidence settle over him. He wasn't just a black CEO in a high-powered world, he was now a leader in a fight for equality. He knew the road ahead would be difficult, but for the first time, he felt like he was on the right side of history. Days passed after the press conference, and Marcus could feel the momentum building. The dealership, which had tried to bury the issue, found itself under an increasingly bright spotlight. The media coverage didn't stop, if anything, it was intensifying. Public pressure mounted, forcing the company to release a statement acknowledging the need for better diversity training and more transparency in their sales process. It was a start, but Marcus wasn't impressed. This wasn't the change he had called for. "They're only reacting because they're being exposed," Marcus told his lawyer, pacing around his office one afternoon. "They still haven't committed to real change." "Not yet." His lawyer agreed, but they both knew that what had started as a battle for a car had turned into a much larger fight, one that could reshape how businesses interacted with people of color in a country where systemic racism was still deeply entrenched. "We need to keep pushing," his lawyer said. "This is just the beginning." Marcus nodded. He wasn't going to let up. As the days turned into weeks, Marcus used the attention he was receiving to his advantage. He started speaking at events, sharing his experience with business leaders and advocates, and calling out discriminatory practices whenever he saw them. He became a symbol not just of resistance, but of the power of a single individual to bring about change. He wasn't afraid to take risks anymore, and the more he spoke out, the more people rallied behind him. In a meeting with his team, Marcus laid out his vision. "This is more than just a personal victory for me," he said, his voice steady, yet filled with passion. "This is about all of us. Every time we let these things slide, we're telling the next generation that they have to settle for less, that they have to accept the status quo. We have to be the ones who change that narrative." His team listened intently, their eyes filled with admiration for their leader. They knew that Marcus had not just fought for a car, but for a fundamental shift in how people of color were treated in the business world. But Marcus also knew that this fight was far from over. The dealership was still working behind the scenes to minimize the damage to their reputation. Marcus had made them uncomfortable, but he wasn't naive enough to believe they would just roll over and accept defeat. He prepared for the next step. He met with activists, legal experts, and other leaders in the fight for racial justice, strategizing ways to create lasting change. It was clear to him now that his battle had transcended his personal experience. It was about creating a world where everyone had equal access, equal treatment, and equal opportunities. He wanted to be part of that change, to help reshape a system that had long been rigged against people who looked like him. The dealership eventually made good on their promise, publicly acknowledging the need for reform. They committed to a comprehensive racial sensitivity training program for their staff, and they pledged to implement changes to their sales practices. Marcus was invited to sit down with their executive board, where they discussed long-term goals and how they could help foster a more inclusive environment. It was a victory, but Marcus knew it was just the beginning. This fight was bigger than one dealership, it was about changing the rules for everyone. And Marcus was ready for whatever came next. Months passed, and while the immediate uproar from the media and the public had subsided, Marcus felt the ripple effects of his actions every day. The dealership had followed through on its promises, though Marcus wasn't sure if that was due to genuine change or the result of their desire to save face. Regardless, the fact remained that they had taken steps to acknowledge the problem and work toward solutions. For Marcus, that was a small but significant victory. However, he wasn't content to let this one success define him. This wasn't about one car, one company, or one apology. It was about shifting the entire culture of business to better reflect the diversity of the world it operated in. Marcus had been invited to speak at corporate summits, to advise leaders on how to build more inclusive environments, and to share his journey in overcoming adversity. His voice had become an influential tool for change. More and more, Marcus was approached by people who had similar stories, black professionals, business owners, and even everyday customers who had been ignored, overlooked, or mistreated in ways that mirrored his own experience. Each conversation reinforced the urgency of the issue. In the weeks following the dealership settlement, Marcus began planning his next move. He could feel the pull of something larger on the horizon. He started gathering data on racial discrimination in high-end markets, speaking with researchers and compiling reports. He envisioned a platform, a movement, that would serve as both a resource for those impacted by discrimination and a tool for holding corporations accountable. The idea for a non-profit organization began to take shape in his mind, one that would focus on advocating for racial equity in the marketplace, conducting audits of business practices, and pushing for the kind of transparency that would prevent another incident like his from happening again. Marcus had spent years building his tech startup, creating a legacy of success. But this was his chance to create something that could transcend his own experience and help others. He wasn't going to stop until there was real, systemic change. One evening, as he sat in his office, staring at a list of potential partners for his new venture, his phone rang.
It was the dealership manager, the one who had been at the heart of the initial controversy. Marcus hesitated for a moment before answering. "Marcus," the manager said, his voice surprisingly cordial, "I wanted to reach out personally and thank you." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Thank me," he replied, his voice neutral. "Yes," the manager continued, "for forcing us to confront our own shortcomings. We've made real changes, and we're committed to continuing the process. What you did wasn't easy, but it was necessary." Marcus remained silent for a beat. He wasn't sure whether to accept the apology or to dismiss it outright, but he realized something: his fight had made them uncomfortable, it had forced them to change, and that was exactly what he had set out to do. "I appreciate that," Marcus said slowly. "But you're not done. There's still more work to be done, not just with your company, but across the industry. We're just getting started." The conversation ended on a note of cautious optimism, but Marcus knew he was only beginning to scratch the surface. He hung up the phone and looked out of the window, deep in thought. It wasn't just about the battles won or the personal victories. It was about the long game, the kind of world he wanted to help create, where success wasn't defined by race or the color of your skin, but by your abilities, your hard work, and your vision. As the sun set over the skyline, Marcus knew one thing for sure: his fight had only just begun.